Uncatchable, Freedom as It Is. Episode 8, Making Progress. This story was tough. The situation with Thomas worked against me. At the time, the law of karma sent me an unpaid bill in that sense. I still don't understand my attitude, but it is useless to go back to the past, which cannot be changed, only learn from it. My experiences at night were still the same. My exits from the body were more similar to dreams than leaving the body in full consciousness. I knew that I was being limited in some way, but in matters of spirit and the astral plane, I had the humility to accept that I knew absolutely nothing. Well, it's not that I was ignorant at this point, but there were more things I didn't know than what I knew, and that would have to add to my lack of comprehension, which would be the next step. In short conversations with Estella, she explained the 3 levels: knowing, understanding, and comprehending. Comprehending is the basic part, how to understand what is being read, the words, their meaning, and the ideas they convey. Understanding was more like assimilating the reading and having it present enough to be a variable in our actions. And knowing was the knowledge of the results. That is, our actions tinted with the understanding and comprehension of knowledge to assume responsibility for our decisions. Knowing doesn't mean doing good, but we can't plead ignorance, and in this, the one who knows is more guilty than the ignorant. In my case, regarding Thomas, I only found myself in the first part of understanding. And with my actions, I tried to understand by making trial and error experiments without thinking and ignoring the consequences. Later, I would learn that there is not a single way to learn. For a time, there were periods of several weeks when prison life went on as usual, with a few exceptions, where it seemed that I was allowed to leave the body with some freedom. Always at dawn. At that time, I continued my investigation for the escape. I visited friends, not-so-friends, and even enemies, or as Estella told me to call them, future investment friends. Estella explained to me that God calls all his children, and in the same way that Jesus said that no sheep will be lost, she told me that enemies were our greatest beneficiaries, as long as we understand how to assimilate the lessons, no matter how hard they are. Nobody is condemned to suffer the law of Talion. The murderer doesn't need to be killed to learn. However, it is ourselves who feel ashamed in front of others. The spiritual world is a world of moral laws. Our actions are the effect of our inner selves. Many people use 1,000 excuses to avoid doing good, but everyone has God's laws engraved in their conscience, and proof of that is the moral progress of civilizations. Despite some stumbling blocks, wars are becoming shorter and more focused. She told me, during the Second World War, no stray bullet landed on Swiss soil, implying that there is a basic principle of necessary stability behind everything. Even the worst people understand that, and without that principle, it is impossible to build anything, including prisons. Everything needs stability, and that is something that men begin to deeply understand as one of the pillars of any civilization or community. Without stability, you cannot continue building. Estella told me, "You can talk to me thanks to indestructible moral principles, which are the same ones that make the seed germinate, produce the flower's perfume, and give man food so that he can strengthen himself, build a house, and the necessary technology for his comfort, which leads him to invest more and more time in his mental world, and that by decantation ends up exploring the spiritual world." I was mesmerized by her lectures, and every now and then Estella scolded me for not paying attention. I understood very well my gaze towards that heavenly woman who not only attracted me physically but also intellectually. I said to myself, what more could I ask for? A woman who is extremely attractive, intelligent, who has something of a mother towards me, and a lot of a woman on top of that. Only I can see her. Estella continued to call my attention so that I would internalize her lessons. If there's one thing I've learned from disembodied spirits, it's that they don't like to waste time. They can repeat when it's hard for us to understand, but they don't like to repeat if we don't pay attention or we take them lightly. After a few excursions, I was able to understand that morality is linked to willpower and that the latter is linked to intellectuality and knowledge of science. To say science was to say trial and error, it was to say the search for God. For some more proud, the search for the beginning of life, the why of things, the functioning of the universe. I understood that all learning, that everything that man has managed to understand and apply in a serial way, that is, to be able to replicate over and over again at will, be it in the field that is of immense human knowledge, that became part of the spiritual patrimony, and that my ability to leave the body is due to several incarnations in places in India and Japan. In ancient times, also some intermediate incarnations in another world with different characteristics, which accelerated the unfolding process as something more normal in the life of that world. My tendencies to observe led me down that path. It was not just observing outwardly, but also inwardly. Estella told me that in previous incarnations, I was looking for ways to get inside myself, in whatever way possible, and that this was due to the fact that in several incarnations, my mothers did not even want me in their wombs and did everything possible to get me out as soon as possible. This traumatized my spirit, and the idea of the maternal womb remained in my psyche. Hence the tendency towards constant introspection, which led me to dangerous experiments from which I was rescued almost every time. So this was my reality now. More and more my ability to get out of the body became more natural, like waking up in the morning or going to the bathroom. When someone needs to go to the bathroom, he uses his willpower to go there and naturally do his business. In my case, I felt something similar. More and more I felt it as a necessity, and as I practiced it became easier for me. An exercise that I discovered naturally, later I would find out that it really is a technique, was the following. Being still in any position, I would look at an object at least 3 feet away from me and try to project myself. Once I was close to the object, I would try to observe it and its surroundings. The objective is to turn around and see oneself. When that happened, I was already out of the body. My memory also began to improve remarkably, so I was remembering details of the guards, security codes, procedures, and everything related to the personal life of each one. Since I didn't have paper and pencil while I was out of the physical body, I had to strain my memory. During the day, I would verify my information. I would greet the guards and ask them personal questions or about their families. I quickly realized that this technique caused a lot of suspicion among them, as they would then talk among themselves, a conversation I could witness where they commented on the strangeness of my greetings. From then on, before verifying the data from my spiritual memory, I would generate a previous conversation, and if the guard later showed doubt, I would remind him that we had already talked about this. This saved me a lot of work. The only thing left was to figure out how to get my physical body out of prison. I felt like a dog with 2 tails when suddenly and without warning Tristan showed up in the cell in the mid-afternoon while Nando and I were having some mate. He couldn't have been more unpunctual. It seemed like he was doing it on purpose. "Ray, I came to tell you that your exams are ready," he said confidently and continued. "We have been observing your personal progress, and I have reports from Estella. Despite everything, our superiors have decided that if you really want to help William and Estella, you must study some books and start meditating. Reflect on your actions towards Thomas and his father." Meanwhile, I had to juggle following Nando's conversation and Tristan's. Fortunately, Nando was playing with his cell phone, but he constantly interrupted me, showing me videos of great spiritual elevation and jokes of all kinds. Tristan called me outside the cell and said with seriousness on his face, "Ray, this is getting serious and dangerous in a way. You have to decide what you want to do. From now on, there is no turning back. For us to continue, we need to make some magnetic alterations to your perispirit, so that it is easier for you to stay out of the body for longer and for your memory to transfer the spiritual teachings of the higher world to your material brain." Tristan raised an eyebrow at seeing my poker face in the North Pole. Worse was his reaction to my question, "What is a perispirit?" Tristan's eyes widened in surprise. He closed his eyes, lowered his head, making a negative gesture. He looked back at me, turned around, and disappeared. To this day, I still don't understand why he was so offended by my question. I'm a student just starting out. Of course, Tristan told me that they were observing my progress, but also my day-to-day actions, including my readings. Tristan was angry because one of the books I read was The Book of Mediums by Allan Kardec, where he explains in detail what the paraspirit is and how it works, with the small difference that my mind was anywhere but in the book. Later on, reading again, I laughed at how many times Kardec uses the word paraspirit. Now that I think about it, if Tristan were like Nando, I would have gotten a black eye. I really had to decide. I left Nando in the cell and went for a walk to clear my mind. I ran into Thomas and William, neither of whom looked at me with much love, and then I saw Brian, the guard who fed those creatures stuck to the walls. I was curious and wondered, what's Brian's life like, always emitting those dark threads and spider webs? Inside me, that thing that moved when I knew I was going to do something I shouldn't, sped up. I saw that Brian was leaving. His shift was over. How could I make it in time to follow him out of my body? There were still a couple of hours to go before the sun set. In the cell with Nando, I won't be able to do much. So I decided to go to the patio of the stage, the same one that was rarely used, where there were more paranormal effects, and where behind the walls that faced the outside of the prison, there were creepy creatures that were constantly waiting. I got up on stage so the tower guard could see me. I leaned against the stage wall as if taking a nap, and immediately began to relax all the muscles in my body one by one. As it was one of the exercises that I had been practicing for a while, it was easy for me. Now I had to try to get out of the body without falling asleep.